That was the opening of Highway 1 U.S.A. by William Grant Still. My name is Aurelia Andrews, and I am the primary repetiteur for Highway 1 this season. If you don't know, a repetiteur is like I'm a pianist, obviously I'm a pianist, and a coach. I coach the singers, I play for the staging rehearsals, and get to work closely with the director and the cast on this show. Although William Grant Still is a very, very prolific composer with over 200 works that were performed a lot in his lifetime, they're still performed a lot, and he enjoyed a lot of popularity. This is my first opportunity to work on one of his pieces, and it's been really cool to spend time learning about him and to kind of learn about not just specifically African-American music in the American music of 20th century and the development of that style, but just the American music that developed in the 20th century and his role in that. William Grant Still was born in Mississippi in 1895, but he was raised in Little Rock, Arkansas. He was the son of two college-educated parents, which was rare in that time for African Americans. And he studied music quite informally as a young man. He took violin lessons and taught himself to play a lot of other orchestral instruments like the clarinet and the oboe and the bassoon. His mother really wanted him to study medicine, so he studied medicine in college for a couple of years but didn't graduate and went to eventually the Oberlin Conservatory of Music to study music. He served in the Navy in World War I, and after that he moved to Harlem, where he played in the Pit Orchestra on Broadway. He worked with a lot of other artists in Harlem and was part of this community of Black artists and the Harlem Renaissance in the 20s and 30s. His collaborations in Harlem with artists like Langston Hughes and Alan Locke played a really big part in the development of his musical style and his ideals about how African-American composers and African-American artists could fit into the American arts scene and how they could influence the American arts scene. One of the things that influenced his choice of music, of the content, the style, and the presentation was this effort for him and for his colleagues, this effort to move away from the old stereotypical portrayals of African Americans on stage, in literature, in music, and in the arts, to get away from this kind of old vaudeville representation of African Americans. He and many others in the Harlem Renaissance wanted to develop a clearer representation of actual Black culture in America, not only from the perspectives of the white storytellers, but from the perspective of the people in the actual culture. One of his real kind of achievements was this ability to compose concert music and classical music that was typically or historically for a European aesthetic or from a European aesthetic, but in a unique African-American voice speaking for itself and on its own behalf. I think it's also worth noting that when we recognize Still's presence and contributions to the Harlem Renaissance, we see that it so often is portrayed as having to do with jazz and pop culture, but that also these artists significantly contributed and influenced classical music in America, American classical music, not just jazz. Representation is such a hugely important topic, and of course there are so many different views and opinions about how best to promote representation, especially in the arts. William Grant Still received a lot of pushback, a lot of negative reviews, both directly for his own work and also for his collaborations from his and other Black artists' refusal to conform and give in to stereotypes and stereotypical representations or portrayals of Black Americans, showing situations that are relatively universal, such as going to a gas station or having a family, eating breakfast, things that show the serious everyday ups and downs of life, but that aren't exclusive to race or class. We can see that really clearly in Highway 1 with this kind of regular family. There's a husband and wife, and they have a brother who's in college, and they have family friends, family obligations. The race is not even really essential to the story. And William Grant Still, when he proposed this show, when he sent it to people, for review and for consideration. He specifically said, race is not the reason we're doing this show. It's not a central point of the story. Highway 1 centers around a young couple, Mary and Bob, who own a successful service station, a gas station along Highway 1, and they're using their financial profits and self-reliance to support Bob's younger brother, Nate, in college. There's a small blurb from the synopsis in the front of the score that I'm going to read. It says, in the United States, Highway 1 runs from the north to the south. Driving along it, one can see stretches of picturesque countryside, occasionally homes of the rich or the poor, and can frequently pass through cities or villages. And while driving along Highway 1, one may also stop at a filling station, such as the one owned by Bob and Mary, never suspecting the drama that dwells within it. So that's kind of setting the stage for the story that is very relatable. And now I'm going to talk about a few musical elements that you can listen for as you're watching the performance. Also, I think it's important or interesting to note that the librettist and the composer worked very closely together, as William Grant still liked to work with all of his librettists very closely. This librettist, Verna Arvey, was his wife, so they obviously worked very closely together and were really working together to create this story of humanity, of devotion, and of life for this young couple. We get the opera opening with Bob. He's preparing for a trip to go see Nate's graduation. And within a few minutes, we learn that he is supporting Nate because of a promise that he made his mother when she was dying, that he would help Nate make his way in the world, that he would help him gain an education to fulfill his mother's dream. And he talks a lot about his mother's dream. He said, she had a dream of a son with knowledge, with learning, with influence, who would go into the world and make a name for himself. So this theme, I call it the mother's dream theme, which is totally made up. So if you talk to someone and say mother's dream theme, they will not know what you're talking about. But the mother's dream theme, where Bob sings, she had her dream of a son with learning. And then in the second verse of his aria, he sings it again, slightly different. She had her dream of a son with great knowledge. And so you quickly get the idea, and you get this point that it's not necessarily Bob's dream or even Nate's dream. It's their mother's dream of having this influential, educated son, and that Bob is really dedicated to fulfilling his mother's dream, to keeping his promise to help that happen. So when we see Bob in this aria, he talks a lot about his mother, and then he talks a little bit about himself, and we get the idea that he really is fairly self-deprecating, and he believes that Nate has so much more potential than he does, that he's really gonna go far, and that Bob feels his role is to support that and to facilitate that. So just from the beginning of his aria, so you can hear this theme really well and then recognize it as it comes up, because it does come up throughout the whole show so many times. So Bob sings, she had her dream of a son with learning, a child who would send our name forth over all the world, whose deeds would command respect, whose deeds would win wide acclaim. So he's singing about all of his mother's dreams for Nate. So this theme that Bob has set up of his mother's dream comes back later on in the show when Mary is singing. Bob spends all of his time talking about Nate's potential and his brains, and Bob speaks about his own brawn and that he's a simple man and has a plain life. But then when Mary is talking about Bob, it's very interesting to hear how she reveals that she sees that Nate is lazy and selfish, and that he does not have all this potential, and that he's not doing anything with it, but that Bob is really the one with all of the potential, the one with all of the virtues. So Mary sings about Bob. Mary sings about Bob, and this dream, the mother dream theme, comes back underneath what Mary is saying. When Mary says, how could their mother have misjudged her children like this? How could she not see that Bob deserves all of the dreams? Bob deserves all of the acclaim and all of the respect. She talks about the neighbors who really respect Bob and the people who value Bob. So if you listen, you'll hear the Mother's Dream theme. When Mary's singing, she sings, "How could their mother have had such faith in Nate when Bob deserves it?" And then we hear this, "She had her dream of a son with learning." So Mary sings, "When Bob deserves it." And we hear the mother theme. "How could she so misjudge her own children?" So Mary is giving us insight into Bob and his potential and how valued he is and how he doesn't see that about himself. When the chorus comes in, it's meant to give this idea of this close-knit community, neighbors and friends who come to see Bob off on his trip or to take him to the train station. And their music is very straightforward, and they sing about how Mary and Bob are their friends, their values, their contributions to the community, and how happy they are when they're happy. So I want to kind of play some of their music so you can hear these different styles that we get. Because we've had the Mother's Dream theme. And then, of course, Mary sings, and there's the Mother's Dream underneath it. And then now we have the chorus coming in and singing about Mary and Bob and bringing in their kind of energy. And they sing, it's very straightforward, but they have some really cool harmonies. So it's not simple, but it is straightforward and very honest. It's very honest and earnest what they sing. So this is the chorus. They come in and they sing, "Mary and Bob are friends, staunch and able, good to have near, for they are dependable." So they're already immediately singing about how wonderful Mary and Bob are as parts of the community. They sing, "They will lend a helping hand, never asking for praises. They show goodwill with deeds instead of fancy phrases." I think it immediately gives this idea that their community is so strong, that they are good friends, and that Mary and Bob really have earned the respect and loyalty of their community and their neighbors. Later on, Mary laments her situation to her close friend, Aunt Lou, talking about how Bob has just been supporting Nate and giving all of their money to Nate, and that now he's going to still continue to support Nate even after Nate graduates from college. And that Mary says, "What about our dreams?" And he's forgotten us. He's forgotten his wife. He's forgotten our lives and the things that we want. So we get, after Mary sings to Aunt Lou and after we have the chorus, we move into scene 2. And you see on this, you'll see on stage that time is passing. The interesting thing about the music at the beginning of scene 2 is that it's the same musical gesture as the opening of the show, but kind of deconstructed and a little bit plain, almost like it's showing this kind of like solid marching of time without very much happening. So if you remember from the very beginning, when I played this gesture that comes back, then you'll hear the same thing at the beginning of scene 2. But it's very different in the presentation. So this is what it actually sounds like on the piano. So it's just, I mean, it's the same thing. It's the rhythm doesn't change. The musical gesture is the same as the beginning, but unless you know to listen for it, you may not recognize it because it's so different sounding. But it really does give this idea of time passing and nothing really changing. And so then it opens up on a scene of Mary and Bob, again in their kitchen, as they were at the beginning. And Bob is starting to realize and acknowledge that Nate is not living up to or rising to the occasion, living up to this potential in his education, that he's lazy and he's taking advantage of their home and their kindness. So Bob starts talking about this. He calls it, the aria is a dream wasted, a dream wasted, a sacrifice in vain, years lost to give the boy his chance, our hope shattered, our work all unrepaid. So he's really kind of lamenting the fact that Nate's doing nothing after Bob has put in so much effort to help him and facilitate it. But as the aria goes on, the music kind of builds, and Bob expresses that he's angry a little bit. But what happens, and you'll hear in the music, is that it grows and then it kind of backs off, and it grows and kind of backs off, almost as if Bob is saying, "I'm angry, but I still got to believe in him because my mom did. I'm angry. It's not going well, but it's going to be fine, right? I can't be angry because I promised my mom." And what's interesting then also is that Bob talks about Nate and how poorly he treats the neighbors. It says he treats our neighbors like morons, and he doesn't seem to remember that this is where all of his success comes from. We've supported this what he calls this plain life has given him everything that he has. But then, even though he is talking about Nate and how Nate is unworthy or not fulfilling his potential and not doing everything he could, Bob really takes the blame on himself. And he blames himself. He says, "Up in heaven, my mother must have seen how badly I've failed." And he takes all of the responsibility for himself and says, "Oh, I've failed because, Nate's not doing anything with his life." And I think Mary, you can tell that Mary is a little bit frustrated. Like, why is this your fault that Nate's doing nothing? And Bob just seems to really always take the responsibility on himself and always to take the failure on himself. So when at the end of his aria, he says, this is Bob singing about his mother again. "Up in heaven, my mother must have seen how sadly we failed to carry out her will. I hope she knows how steadily we've toiled. I hope she knows how honestly we've tried." After this aria, and he sings this, at the very end he says, "No, it must be me," again, taking the responsibility on himself. He says, I hope my mother knows how honestly I've tried. And then, even though he is angry at Nate, he circles back to, no, I'll just keep working to support Nate. So he says, "But now maybe it's not too late," mother's theme. And then, "Where she found good, there must be good. Since she believed in him, since she loved him." And then he sings, "Then I promise I'll try again. Then I promise I'll try again." So Bob always circles back to this. It's my failure. I'm going to keep trying. I believe in my mom's dream. After this, we finally meet Nate. After only having seen Nate through the eyes of Mary and Bob and the community, now we finally meet Nate. Now, if you heard Nate's music out of context, you would think, oh my goodness, he has so many dreams. He's such a dreamer, and it's a little bit inspiring and maybe even sympathetic. But when you hear what he says, what he does immediately, without talking about any of his actual dreams, he just talks about Bob and how Bob doesn't have any dreams and how Bob is a simple man. So he sings, and listen to his music. His music is fairly sweeping and grand and beautiful, in contrast to some of the other music we've heard. So we had the chorus music that was very straightforward. This Mary and Bob, our friends staunch and able. Then contrast that with Nate, who gets this already you can hear is so dramatic and so sweeping. But when you hear the words, Nate is singing, what does he know of dreams? How can he talk of success? The honk of a horn gives him his thrills. So he's talking about Bob, and he's really kind of ridiculing Bob, which is upsetting because Bob has supported him so much and in all of these, his education and all of his lifestyle and all of his life. But again, it's this contrast where Nate has all these lofty ideals and this entitlement, and he really does believe that he's wonderful, but he hasn't done anything and he doesn't have any relationships. Whereas Bob has this love for his kind of regular life and his work, his hard work, but he also has this whole community whose respect and loyalty he's really earned with Mary. So Nate sings this aria about how he sings, how can Bob, what does he know of dreams? He ends with, what does he know of dreams? How can he talk of success? And so, and he's talking to Mary, and of course Mary has decided to just kind of to humor Nate and say, sure, because she's really hoping that Bob will start to see his laziness and see how selfish he is. And so Nate is saying all this to Mary, and I don't want to give away too many of the plot points now and just tell you everything that happens in the show. So I am going to take a minute now and talk about ensembles, because a key element of opera is ensemble. It's one of the things that opera does best, and I think one of the things that only opera can do is have all these people saying different things at the same time and have it actually work on stage. So this opera actually has almost no ensembles. If you take out the chorus numbers, it's almost all dialogue or recitative arias until the very end when Bob and Mary sing a duet together. It's so beautiful. They finally come together and sing this duet. And it has elements of the Mother's Dream theme, but slightly evolved. And I think it showcases, at least for me, it showcases this idea that Bob has taken his mother's dream and realized that it's okay for him to now have his own dream with his own family, with Mary, to have their future and dream of their future and to work toward that he doesn't have to put all of his eggs in the Nate basket. So he sings. His duet with Mary begins when he says, listen, Mary, trust me. The days ahead will shine for us. The Mother's Dream theme, she had her dream of a son. And then now Bob sings to Mary, the world is ours for the asking. It's not exactly the same, but it's the same shape. You'll see da-dee-da-dee-da. And then he sings, the world is ours for the asking. And he's taken it, for me, it shows this evolution of his dream. And he's like, okay, I can take this dream and I can be with Mary and we can work toward our goals and let Nate make his own decisions and make his own way in the world. So Bob sings at the end, and you'll know when you arrive at this duet that you're on the home stretch and that you're to the end where Bob and Mary sing about their love for each other and their dreams together. So he sings, listen, Mary, trust me, the days ahead will shine for us. There'll be no time wasted, Mary, trust me. And then, of course, Mary says, that's what I hoped you would say. Bob, this is what I've dreamed of. And then Mary takes on the same music. She sings, oh, Bob, I love you. I trust you. The days ahead will shine for us. There'll be no time wasted now. So they spend this beautiful duet singing about their devotion to each other, and it's such a lovely ending to the opera because it does kind of move them back into this, and now we go back to our normal life where we dream of the things that we want to do and the future we want to build. But again, as a casual observer who comes to the gas station, you might say, oh, look, there's Mary and Bob at the gas station, and leave, never having known this journey that they've gone on as regular people to live their dreams and to realize what it is that they want to work for together. So in summary, just the things to listen for as you go to see the show are the Mother's Dream theme. She had her dream of a son with learning. And then the chorus with their enthusiasm for life, their strong values, their commitment to their community, and their loyalty and love of Bob and Mary with this Mary and Bob, our friends staunch and able, good to have. together, for they are dependable. And then Nate's sweeping music with this text that doesn't quite match, where he's ridiculing his older brother. And then Mary and Bob's ending duet, where they sing about not wasting any time and living their life and going after their dreams. So I hope that all of this helps you to engage with the story and really enjoy this exciting return to live theater after a long pause. Thank you so much for joining me for this opera preview, and we can't wait to welcome you to the Outdoor 2021 Festival season and to Highway 1 USA.